Today's word is inspired by the New Testament book of 2 Timothy, chapter 1, verse 7. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. Now we'll speak our statement of faith as we always do. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotence.
Please join me as we prepare for meditation. This morning's meditation song is entitled Show Me the Way by Jana Stanfield and Jan Garrett. Please join me as together we take a deep breath in and release that breath. And we say in this time, show me the way. Show me the way. As we join together our minds and our hearts in that oneness. Breathe with me again. And release. And in this time together, let us just gently set aside all concerns. Anything in the outer world that seems to be calling for our attention. And there is so much right now. So give yourself the gift of going inward. Slip away from your thoughts for just a few moments. Move on down into your heart space. And you can place your hands over your heart if that helps you to anchor that awareness. Breathe with me again. And release. And we call forth in this time together, Holy Comforter. Holy Comforter. Say that to yourselves, Holy Comforter. What does that word mean to you, comfort, today? Comfort. I share a few words with you this morning from Unity Minister Jim Rosemergy. He says, life is standing in the light. Hopefully these recent days of reflection and pondering have revealed that darkness is no thing. It is not a presence. It has no presence. It does not go anywhere when the light is turned on, nor does it return when the light is turned off. This is an important insight. Darkness, of course, has many names. It has been called lack, sickness, death, sin. We do not spend time resisting these imperfections of humankind. And it does not mean that they are to be our companions forever. They are not. However, our work is not to resist them or struggle with them. This has been tried and has always met with failure. On the other hand, we are not to remain idle. There is work to be done. We are a full-time project. We are not to contend with the darkness. We are dedicated to discovering the light. Take a breath in with me. Holy Comforter, show us the light, that we are indeed still standing in that divine light. Never alone. Never separate from our Creator. Breathe with me and release. We are standing in the light. It is what we choose in this very now moment. Just in this moment, we take that thought into the silence. Take another breath in with me now. And as we come back to this place and this space right here, right now, just for today, we choose to stand in the light. Holy Comforter, we recognize you now. And so it is. Amen.
Having accepted that The Holy Spirit is here right now, comforting and leading us. We continue on with our service, knowing that there are many people around the world who are being shaken by fear as we cope with the current COVID-19 pandemic. Many people have been told to stay home from their jobs, and so I know they're concerned about income and elderly family members, loved ones that they don't live near perhaps. There are so many levels of things that we can be afraid of right now. And yet today, I'm inviting all of us to perhaps let go of any sense of panic and frantic efforts to make things different, but to simply be present with things the way they are and allow God to show us the next step. My beloved Prince Al, in a lesson that he gave many years ago now, told this story, and I think it fits here this morning. During World War II, there was a group of people called Gurkhas from Nepal, and they had a reputation for being fearless soldiers. A group of Gurkhas was under the command of a British officer. One morning, he called the Gurkha commander and told him, "Your men will be participating in a raid into enemy territory. They will be jumping from the aircraft at an altitude of 1,000 feet. The Gurkha commander said, "Very well, sir, I will brief my men." A little later, the Gurkha commander returned and said, "Sir, the men said they would rather jump from 500 feet. The British officer replied, 500 feet? The parachutes would never open." To which the Gurkha commander replied, "Oh, parachutes." Gurkha soldiers have been defined as small of stature, large of heart, accustomed to hardship, good-natured, with a keen sense of humor, loyal to death, more disciplined than any fighting force in the world, brave, capable, and absolutely without fear. And so, wow, absolutely without fear. Would you like to be absolutely without fear? Well, you know, we might think so, but I wouldn't actually believe that to be a good thing. We aren't Gurkhas, for one thing. And the other thing is that fear is required to keep us out of harm's way. It helps keep us from being injured or killed. Being totally fearless could lead us into unnecessary peril. Friends, it is not unspiritual or lacking in faith to have fear. Some fear is natural and serves as a protective response to threat, but fear running rampant can have damaging effects. So today, because fear seems to be running rampant for many, we will explore how we can manage the fears that we have about our current conditions from a spiritual perspective that works through our humanity to create well-being. This is especially important right now because if we don't manage our fear, it will manage us. Not acknowledging our fear can lead us into denial of facts and cause us to have a cavalier attitude toward them. Ignoring the facts can have exceedingly unhappy results. A dear friend shared this bit of wisdom from Al-Anon. Stand in faith and tie up your camel. And I think that says it all for me. It's like trust God and do what you need to do. I have often told students that came to my classes, if you're not absolutely certain that you know how to dematerialize, I recommend that you not step out in front of an oncoming bus. And so I'm suggesting the same thing about the way that we're interacting with the pandemic. If we're not absolutely certain that we know how to heal and to stay healthy, I believe it is wisdom for us to follow the guidance of experts and those individuals who are leading us right now. We can act in wisdom without being fearful. For example, we use seat belts not because we're afraid, but because we know that accidents can happen, and we're better off with a seatbelt if we happen to be involved in one. We have fire alarms in our homes and public buildings, not because we're afraid, but because we want an early warning if there is a fire. We can best manage fear by centering ourselves in faith that God is bringing forth a good outcome and taking outer actions as guided in our prayers. Webster's dictionary defines fear as a painful emotion marked by expectation of evil or the apprehension of impending danger, anxiety, alarm, or dread. Fear is part of the human condition. If you look on the internet, there are approximately 8 million entries concerning fear, and there are hundreds of references to fear in the Bible. So obviously, fear is a pretty hot topic, and it's been around for thousands of years. All of us are born with a set of instinctive fears: fear of falling, fear of the dark, fear of lobsters, the fear of falling on lobsters in the dark, public speaking, and of the words, "some assembly required." And right now, it seems that there's also, for many people, a rather significant fear of running out of toilet paper. When surveys were taken and people were asked to rank their fears, the fear of public speaking was ranked as number 1. So do you know what was second? Fear of death. So as comedian Jerry Seinfeld said, if you are at a funeral, you're better off in the coffin than giving the eulogy. As Richard and Mary Alice Jafola say in their book, The Quest, we have all experienced fear, and there are times in our lives when fear is a perfectly normal reaction. And then they go on to tell us about a time when they drove right into the middle of a shootout. They had turned onto an interstate and were suddenly surrounded by state troopers who were shooting at a fugitive who was careening down the road at full speed in his bullet-riddled car. They wrote, "It was quite a while before our emotions settled down. That was certainly a time when we were afraid. No, terrified would be a better description. It was an immediate, natural, and instinctive survival response." So haven't we all had experiences that frightened us and left us with a racing heart and maybe weak knees? This is spontaneous fear, the kind which is difficult to control and which passes when the danger is over. And this is not really the kind of fear I'm talking about today. That kind of fear is a normal, immediate, and protective response to danger. What I want to talk about being afraid of are things over which we have no control, or that we do have control. Fear, which we have created in our own minds. Fear of being inadequate, or fear of being alone, fear of expressing our opinions or becoming sick, of not getting well, not being ourselves, fear of success. I mean, that one's scraping the bottom of the barrel, don't you think? We're right at the bottom of the fear barrel when we're afraid to succeed, but it's real for some people. Fear, in varying degrees, seems to be a big part of life. Advertisers use it to sell products, and we're afraid that we might not be thin enough, tall enough, short enough, young enough, old enough. We might not have the right car, phone, or alarm system, or even the right prescription drug. So we're rather set up to think that if we just get the right diet plan, or the right car, or the right whatever, then we won't have to be afraid anymore. The media, to some degree, uses fear to get us to buy newspapers or to watch a news program. Don't you love the little teasers they use? They give you just a little dab of information about some news story, just enough so that you're afraid to miss the whole story. Things like a meteor is heading for Earth, film at 11. If you constantly live in a fearful state, There will always be something of which to be afraid. Our goal then is to manage our fear from a position of faith, and while doing whatever we need to do in the outer, at the same time to maintain well-being. And right now, that is praying and knowing that in the grand scheme of things, there is nothing to fear because God is in the midst of this pandemic, knowing that we are loved and one with divine life, and at the same time, practicing social distancing for the time being, washing our hands, maybe more often than we ever have, self-isolating, whatever wisdom tells us we need to do in the outer. Fear becomes harmful when it is a consistent and in focused influence in our lives. But we can manage fear so that it doesn't manage us. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore defined fear as one of the most subtle and destructive errors we can experience. He wrote, "Fear is a paralyzer of mental action. It weakens both mind and body. Fear throws dust in our eyes and hides the mighty spiritual forces that are always with us." And I like the simple definition of fear as an acronym that stands for fully expecting awful results. And we can shift our fear to faith by focusing again and again on God in the midst of everything. Consistent fear, really living from that very anxiety-driven, fearful position in life has negative effects on our bodies, and it causes physical changes. It affects our pulse, our blood pressure, our chemical reactions. Extended periods of fear, constantly living in fear and dealing with fear hurts us not only physically but also emotionally. It's not possible to isolate fear or any emotion to any one particular part of our body. Numerous studies have been made between the connection between the mental and emotional states and many disease processes. So this fear thing, if we actually allow it to stay with us, can hurt us and separate us from an awareness of spirit within. It's impossible, of course, to be separated from spirit, but fear can make us feel separate. So it seems to me obvious that our best answer to fear is to allow it, acknowledge it, work with it, allow it to pass through, and get back to remembering that we are not alone, that God is with us in the midst of whatever it is that we're feeling fear about, as quickly as possible. And so how do we do that? What do we do about the fears that we're facing right now and may face in the future? In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, verse 23, we find this teaching from Jesus that gives us a guide. The scripture tells us that then he, Jesus, got into the boat and his disciples followed him. And then without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. So the disciples ran to him and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." Well, you can imagine how Jesus responded to that. I'm thinking he might have been just a little bit frustrated with the guys because he looked at them in their panicked state, and while they were sort of implying that he cared nothing for them, it's like, "Why aren't you up here saving us? We're going to drown." Jesus said, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" And then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and the storm was completely calmed. And so isn't it like that for us sometimes whenever we're going along with life, everything seems to be pretty normal, and we've kind of let the Christ within go to the background and maybe even put our awareness of it to sleep. And then the storm rises up and we're panicked, we're fear-stricken and terrorized, and then we're running to that part of ourselves that is so secure and so strong and saying, aren't you going to save me? And of course the Christ within says, yes, of course, of course. Look at this. Here's the truth of the matter. These storms, these seas, these winds can be calmed immediately the moment that you allow it to be so. See, it's interesting to me that the disciples had been with Jesus for a long time when this occurred. They'd heard him speak, and they had been there in person to see the healings, the miracles. I mean, they had witnessed his work firsthand, and yet they were still afraid. And before the crucifixion, Peter, one of the most dedicated of the disciples, denied even knowing Jesus because he was afraid. He suffered instant amnesia. And so the disciples just didn't get it either. And they've been right there with our teacher. So friends, if we have fear, I think we're in good company, and we need not punish ourselves over it. There are many fears which may trouble all of us, and they can feel very powerful. The Jepholas in the quest tell us, yet in spite of the terror fear can strike in our hearts, a simple change in our perspective can change them from an object of fear into just another fact of life. When we can accept the truth that God's will for us is only good, then what we have feared will be seen as a stepping stone to our good. Wayne Dyer, in his book, There is a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, wrote, we have trained ourselves to be fearful and anxious when presented with problems. If we choose, we can retrain ourselves to be calm and allow God's self in us once again. Well, in unity, we would differ slightly from Dr. Dyer's thoughts, since we don't believe that God or Spirit could actually be apart from us. God is everywhere, equally present all the time. It is a matter of self-awareness of this oneness with God or Spirit. Gary Zukov, in his book, The Seat of the Soul, said, within each experience of pain or negativity is the opportunity to challenge the perception that lies behind it, the fear that lies behind it, and to choose to learn with wisdom. The fear will not vanish immediately, but will disintegrate as you work with courage. When fear ceases to scare you, it cannot stay. When you choose to learn through wisdom, to evolve consciously, your fears surface one at a time in order for you to exorcise them with your inner faith. Since almost all fears are learned, they can also be unlearned. So how do we rid ourselves of fear? Well, if we were a trapeze artist in training without a safety net, we probably wouldn't try very many tricks and would more likely just swing back and forth all day. But with a safety net, we could attempt to do all kinds of tricks. And the good news is we have a safety net. Our safety net is the awareness that God will never let you fall. You are a child of God, precious and indispensable to God's divine plan for you and for this world. When your conscious connection or unity with God grows, your fears necessarily diminish. Dyer went on to recommend that we make a list of all of our problems and see them if we can find that they are not rooted in fear that you are separate from Spirit. So the next time you feel yourself experiencing fear, think of yourself as part of this perfect love and watch what happens inside of you where fear was residing. He said, I believe you can move into that state of knowing God within through stillness by intentionally choosing calmness in moments of anxiety and fear. And that's exactly the kind of assurance that Reverend Teresa invited us into in our meditation this morning. Shyness, anxiety, insecurity, worry, panic, terror, and dread are all forms of fear. So no matter how fear presents, it all has the same root, forgetting that God is the real force in our lives. Fear dissipates when we remember and align with God as an active presence of love in our lives. When we turn it over to God, fear cannot exist because God is bigger than anything that frightens us. And you can take that to the bank, my friends. God is bigger than anything that frightens us. There's only one presence and one power in my life and in the universe. God, the good omnipotence. This principle applies to every person. It applies all the time, not just when we speak it on Sunday mornings. The Old Testament book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 9, advises, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." And then one last quote from the quest. The Jafolas tell us, when we surrender our fears to God, when we take even a small step toward God, our human weakness becomes absorbed into our divinity, and all is well in our lives. No matter what in your life you are now afraid of, does not change the fact that there still exists a power supporting you, which knows no fear. Know at the very depths of your being, the level where you know your oneness with God, there really is nothing to fear. And as I shared in our message yesterday, these words from Nadine Tomlinson, "Don't be afraid. I will sit with you in the dark and wait until the light comes." Friends, during this challenging time, we may feel afraid, and some days more than others. And what I want you to know is that if you are afraid and want support, we are here at Unity of Daytona Beach to practice Tomlinson's words. And so I invite you to call or email the church and let us know how we can pray with you. How can we support you? We will get back to you if you give us a message. So don't be afraid. God is with you, and so are we. And so let us be here for each other, unafraid and waiting through this time of seeming darkness, knowing that the light of Christ is coming through again. God bless you and have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much, Reverend Carmen, for your beautiful message that surely will bring us peace and comfort in the days ahead. And now join me, please, as we're going to share another song with you from one of Unity's ministers and one of our finest, Richard McDeesey, entitled "Just a Little Faith." So I'm inviting you to set down your coffee cup, set down your tea, put your fork down if you're eating your French toast, because you're going to want to tap your feet and perhaps clap your hands. Thank you, Richard.
Friends, it is that time whenever in our typical service we'd be taking up our collection. And so this morning I invite you to, since we're doing church, virtual church today, and we know it's different, I still want to invite you to be in that consciousness that God is source. There's nothing that will take us out of our fear any faster than remembering that God is source of every good thing that you could want or ever desire. And though you're not physically present to place your contribution in the basket, you can still participate. See, whether you're giving online through PayPal, automatic giving through your bank, or mailing a check, I invite you right now to just take a moment to be still and to infuse your gift with your love and your prayers for it to be a blessing that grows and expands, blesses all, and returns to you multiplied. Join me now in speaking our affirmation of abundance. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God, and it is so. And so, friends, please join me now in prayer. And you may want to just kind of envision yourself kind of reaching out, even though there's not a physical hand there for you to hold. Just imagine that you are holding hands with your church community friends as we pray. We are so anchored in the knowing that God is our source, and we're so grateful for the knowing that God's love and comfort is here with us now and in the days ahead. God is bigger than anything we are facing. We're so grateful for that knowing and for the remembrance that brings us back into full alignment with understanding our connection and our oneness with God. So we give thanks for this opportunity to celebrate with one another virtually rather than in person. And yet we still feel the deep connection and the deep love that really circulates amongst us. Please join me now in speaking our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And so it is. God bless you, friends. Have a wonderful week. We hope you'll join us again next Sunday, Facebook Live. And in the meantime, check out our website and stay up to date with what's happening here at Unity of Daytona Beach.